The wind sliced like a blade of ice, finding the threadbare patches in Elara's coat with cruel precision. It was a predator, that wind. It hunted the weak, the exposed, and she was both. She pulled the collar tighter, a useless gesture against the relentless cold of the city. The fabric was thin, worn smooth by time and desperation. It offered no warmth, only the memory of it. A ghost of comfort. Beside her, a small hand slipped into hers. Lily. Her daughter's fingers were tiny ice chips against her skin. Elara's heart, a heavy stone in her chest, cracked just a little more. She squeezed the small hand, trying to pour what little warmth she had left into her child. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. They stood on a corner where glass towers scraped at a bruised gray sky. Men and women in dark, expensive coats flowed past them, a river of purpose and warmth, their faces set, their eyes fixed on destinations Elara could no longer imagine. They were ghosts to this world, she and Lily. Invisible, unseen. Hunger was a hollow ache deep in her belly, a familiar companion for weeks now. But it was the hunger in Lily's eyes that truly gutted her, that quiet, trusting gaze that still expected her mother to fix everything. How could she explain that everything was broken? That she was broken? Mark's final words echoed in the space between her ears, a phantom ringing that never faded. "You're nothing without me. You'll end up on the street." He was right. Here she was, on the street, with nothing. Less than nothing, because she had a 7-year-old girl who deserved the world, and all Elara could give her was a cold sidewalk and an empty stomach. This was it, the rock-bottom moment, the absolute end of the line, where pride was a luxury she'd pawned weeks ago and hope was a foreign currency. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small, nearly stolen by the wind. "My tummy is making funny noises again." Elara knelt, ignoring the sharp protest of her own empty stomach. She smoothed a stray strand of blonde hair from Lily's face. The child's cheeks were chapped red by the cold, her blue eyes wide and clouded with a weariness no child should ever know. "I know, sweet pea, I know." Her own voice was a dry rasp. "We'll find something soon, I promise." A lie. Another lie to add to the pile. Lily looked past her, her gaze fixed on something down the street. Her expression shifted. It was a look Elara had seen before, the one she got when she was studying a puzzle, trying to fit the pieces together. "What is it, baby?" Lily didn't answer. She just watched. Elara followed her gaze and saw him. A man stepping out of a sleek black car that had pulled silently to the curb. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit that probably cost more than every piece of clothing Elara had ever owned combined. His hair was dark, with distinguished hints of silver at the temples. He moved with an air of quiet authority, his face etched with a kind of focused stress as he glanced at the impossibly grand building before him. He looked like he owned the world, or at least this corner of it. He adjusted his tie, his attention on the glass doors, on the meeting he was surely late for, on the millions of dollars that were likely waiting on his word. He was a creature from another planet, untouchable. Then Lily did something that made Elara's blood run cold. She let go of her mother's hand. She took a step forward, then another. "Lily, no!" Elara whispered, a panicked hiss. "Come back here." But Lily didn't listen. She was on a mission. She walked with the determined gait of a small soldier, right up to the man in the expensive suit. Alistair felt the tug on his coat before he saw the child. It was a small, insistent pull. He was thinking about the quarterly reports, about the hostile takeover bid from Sterling Corp., about the fact that his son, Leo, hadn't smiled once that morning. His mind was a spreadsheet of obligations and anxieties. He looked down. A little girl with wide, serious blue eyes was staring up at him. She had a smudge of dirt on her cheek, and her blonde hair was escaping a worn-out pink hat. His first instinct was irritation, a street kid. He didn't have time for this. He had a board meeting in 10 minutes that could define the future of his company. Then he really looked at her. He saw the desperate hope in her eyes. It was a look he recognized. He saw a shadow of it in his own son's eyes sometimes, in the quiet moments after a nightmare. The look of a child needing an adult to be strong when they couldn't. The irritation evaporated, replaced by a strange, protective pang in his chest. Yes? His voice was softer than he intended. The little girl took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Mister," she said, her voice clear and brave despite the wind that whipped around them. "Can you pretend to be my dad for career day?" The world stopped. The traffic, the wind, the frantic pulse of the city. It all faded into a dull hum. Alistair stared at the child, the question hanging in the frozen air between them. Behind her, he now saw the mother, a woman who looked like a fragile silhouette against the city's harsh lines. She was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and apology. She started forward, ready to snatch her daughter away, to apologize, to disappear back into the crowd. But Alistair held up a hand, a small, almost imperceptible gesture to tell her to wait. He knelt, bringing himself down to the little girl's level. The expensive fabric of his suit trousers pressed against the grimy pavement. He didn't care. "Career day?" he asked gently. The girl nodded, her expression solemn. "It's today, at my school. We're supposed to bring a parent to talk about their job. But my mommy's job is looking for a new job right now. And my real dad, he's gone." Elara felt her knees weaken. She wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. Her daughter, her brave, brilliant, heartbreaking daughter, was asking a stranger for help because she couldn't provide it herself. It was the ultimate proof of her failure. The man looked from Lily to Elara, his gaze no longer just observant, but filled with a sudden, startling understanding. He saw the worn coat, the exhaustion etched into her features, the fierce, protective terror in her eyes. He saw it all in a single, sweeping glance. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He had 100 people waiting for him. His phone was buzzing in his pocket with urgent messages. None of it mattered. He turned back to the little girl. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Well, Lily," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I think my job is pretty interesting. I'd be honored to be your dad for the day." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and pressed a single button. "Catherine," he said, his voice calm and decisive. "Cancel my 10 o'clock. In fact, clear my schedule for the rest of the day. Yes, all of it. Something more important has come up." He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. He stood up, his eyes meeting Elara's over Lily's head. "Alistair Blackstone," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in the swirling chaos of her life. He didn't offer a hand to shake. He seemed to understand that she might flinch, that any sudden movement might spook her. "And you are?" "Elara," she breathed, the name feeling foreign on her own tongue. "Well, Elara," he said, his gaze softening, "it seems your daughter has hired me for the day. But first, I think my new employee and her mother could use some breakfast. A proper one." He didn't ask. He stated it as a fact, a simple, undeniable truth. And for the first time in a very long time, Elara didn't argue. She just nodded, a single, jerky movement, as tears she didn't know she had left began to trace hot paths down her frozen cheeks. The diner was warm. The heat washed over Elara in a wave, making her shiver as the deep-seated cold began to retreat from her bones. It smelled of coffee and bacon and things she hadn't let herself dream of. The booth was plush red leather, a luxury against her tired back. Lily sat beside Alistair, her small legs swinging, a massive plate of pancakes with whipped cream and strawberries in front of her. She was eating with a quiet, focused intensity. Her world shrunk down to the simple, glorious task of getting syrup onto her fork. Elara just stared at her own plate. Eggs, toast, potatoes. A feast. She couldn't bring herself to take a bite. Her stomach was a tight knot of disbelief and shame. Alistair hadn't spoken much. He'd ordered for them with a quiet efficiency, asking Lily what her absolute favorite breakfast was, and then telling the waitress to bring 2 of them. He drank his black coffee and watched Lily, a gentle, unreadable expression on his face. "You should eat," he said softly, his voice pulling her from her trance. She looked up, meeting his eyes. They were a deep, thoughtful gray, like a storm cloud holding back rain. I don't know how to thank you, or how I can possibly repay you." "There's nothing to repay," he said simply. "Eat, you need your strength." She picked up her fork. Her hand trembled. She took a small bite of egg. The taste was overwhelming, real, and solid. The knot in her stomach began to loosen, replaced by the raw, gnawing ache of actual hunger being sated. She ate. After breakfast, he drove them. The black car was silent and warm, smelling of leather and something clean and expensive. Lily fell asleep in the back, her belly full, her face peaceful for the first time in weeks. Elara watched the city slide by through the tinted window. It looked different from in here, less menacing. "The school is another 20 minutes from here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We're not going to the school," Alistair said calmly. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. "What? But you said—" "Lily will be so disappointed." "Lily needs more than a pretend dad for a day," he said, turning to look at her fully for the first time since they'd left the diner. "She needs a warm place to sleep. She needs food. You both do. We're going to my home." "No," she said immediately, the word instinctive. "We can't. We're strangers, a burden." "My home is very large," he replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "It has many empty rooms. It's no burden, and we're not strangers anymore. Lily introduced us." His logic was simple, irrefutable. She had no strength left to fight it. The house wasn't a house. It was an estate, a modern marvel of glass and stone nestled in a grove of old, towering trees, a fortress of quiet wealth. As he led them inside, the sheer scale of it stole her breath. A grand staircase swept upwards into a space that felt more like a museum than a home. It was beautiful, immaculate, and profoundly silent. A boy was sitting at the bottom of the stairs, clutching a tablet. He looked to be around Lily's age, with the same dark hair as Alistair and the same serious gray eyes. He looked up as they entered, his expression immediately wary, guarded. "Leo," Alistair said gently. "This is Elara, and this is Lily. They're going to be staying with us for a while." Leo's eyes flickered from Lily, who was hiding behind Elara's legs, to his father, and then back again. He didn't say a word. He just clutched his tablet tighter and stared. The silence in the vast hall was heavy, thick with questions he wasn't asking. This was the child who didn't smile. Alistair showed them to a guest suite that was larger than their last 3 apartments combined. It had a bedroom with a cloud-like bed, a sitting area, and a bathroom made of marble. It was a gilded cage, and Elara felt a fresh wave of terror. She didn't belong here. This was a mistake. But Lily, revived from her nap, saw the bed, and her eyes lit up. She crawled onto it, burying her face in the soft duvet, and let out a little sigh of pure bliss. Seeing that, Elara's resolve crumbled. For Lily. She would stay for Lily. For one night. The first few days were a blur of tentative adjustments. Elara and Lily kept to their suite, terrified of overstepping, of breaking some unspoken rule. Alistair was busy, leaving early and coming home late, but he always made sure the kitchen was stocked and a kind-faced housekeeper named Mrs. Gable was there to see to their needs. Elara felt useless, a charity case. She watched Leo from a distance. He was a quiet, solitary boy. He moved through the enormous house like a little ghost, always with his tablet, his face illuminated by its cold blue light. He rarely spoke to his father, and he never spoke to her or Lily. He simply observed them with his unnervingly perceptive gray eyes. Lily, however, was not one for silent observation. On the 3rd day, she emerged from their room holding a drawing. She walked straight into the living room where Leo was sitting on the floor, engrossed in his game. She held out the paper to him. He ignored her. "I drew this for you," Lily said. Leo glanced at it, then back at his screen. Elara held her breath, ready to intervene, to pull Lily away from the inevitable rejection. But Lily didn't retreat. She sat down on the floor next to him, not too close, but not far either. She placed the drawing on the rug between them. It was a picture of 2 stick figures, one small with blonde hair, one small with dark hair, holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. She didn't say another word. She just sat there, humming quietly to herself, waiting. Elara watched from the doorway, her heart aching. For an hour they sat in silence, the only sounds the soft beeps from the tablet and Lily's gentle humming. Then, slowly, Leo put down his tablet. He picked up the drawing. He studied it for a long, silent moment. Then he looked at Lily. "The sun isn't yellow," he said, his voice small and rusty from disuse. "It is in my pictures," Lily replied simply. Leo considered this. He looked at the drawing again, then back at her. A flicker of something, curiosity, maybe even the ghost of a smile, crossed his face. He stood up and walked out of the room. He returned a moment later with a small, slightly broken toy robot. He sat back down and placed it next to the drawing. An offering, a key turning in a lock. Elara felt tears well in her eyes. It was the beginning of a thaw. Her own breakthrough came a few days later. She was in the kitchen trying to make herself useful when she saw Leo struggling with the robot. A small piece had come loose, and he couldn't seem to fix it. He was growing frustrated, his small face tight with anger. Before she could think, she was kneeling beside him. "Can I see?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then handed it over. Her hands, she realized, remembered things. They remembered how to be gentle, how to be patient. Mark had always told her she was clumsy, useless, that she broke everything she touched. But her fingers found the small catch, eased the piece back into place, and with a soft click, the robot's arm was fixed. She handed it back to him. Leo stared at the fixed toy, then up at her. His gray eyes were wide with surprise. "Thank you," he whispered. It was more than just a thank you. It was an acceptance. That night, Elara couldn't sleep. The comfort of the bed was too foreign. The silence of the house was too loud. She crept downstairs to the kitchen, needing a glass of water, needing to feel solid ground under her feet. A single light was on over the island. Alistair was there, staring into a mug of tea, his shoulders slumped with a weariness that his expensive suit usually concealed. The Titan looked tired. He looked human. He saw her, and his expression softened. "Couldn't sleep either?" She shook her head, pulling a robe tighter around herself. "This house is very quiet." "It used to be loud," he said, his voice distant. Before my wife passed away. After that, Leo and we forgot how to make noise." There it was, the source of the silence, the ghost that haunted these beautiful, empty rooms. She found herself sitting opposite him at the island, the marble cool beneath her hands. The quiet of the night seemed to invite confession. "I'm sorry," she said. "For your loss?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on his mug. "It was cancer. Fast. Brutal. It took the life out of this house. It took the smile from my son's face. I've spent the last 2 years trying to buy it back for him. Toys, trips, anything he wanted. Nothing worked. I don't know how to fix him, Elara." His voice cracked on the last word. The powerful CEO was gone. In his place was a grieving husband, a lost father. "He spoke to me today," she offered quietly, "and he played with Lily." Alistair looked up, his eyes filled with a raw, desperate hope. "He did?" She gave him a drawing, and I fixed his robot. It was small, but it was something. "Something," he repeated, tasting the word. "For 2 years, it's been nothing. You've been here less than a week, and you've given me something." The vulnerability in his voice emboldened her. She felt a need to offer a piece of her own brokenness, to balance the scales. "Lily's father, Mark," she began, her own voice trembling. "He didn't die. He's the reason we were on the street. He told me I was worthless, that I was a terrible mother, that I couldn't survive without him. For a long time, I believed him. He had a way of making you believe things that weren't true. He would get so angry, his voice—" She trailed off, the memory making her skin crawl. She didn't need to say more. Alistair understood. The shadows in her eyes told the rest of the story. "He was wrong," Alistair said, his voice low and fierce. He reached across the island, his hand covering hers. His touch was warm, steady, not demanding, just there, a point of anchor in a stormy sea. "You are the furthest thing from worthless. I see the way Lily looks at you. You are her entire world. And what you did for Leo, that wasn't small. It was everything." They sat in silence for a long time, 2 wounded souls finding a strange comfort in the shared darkness. His hand never left hers. It was a silent promise, a bond forged in the quiet hours of the night. In that moment, she wasn't a charity case, and he wasn't a benevolent billionaire. They were just Elara and Alistair. And for the first time, in that vast, silent house, she felt the first, fragile seed of something she thought she'd lost forever: hope. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm of quiet healing. Lily and Leo became inseparable, their combined laughter slowly starting to fill the silent halls of the great house. They were a whirlwind of drawings, blanket forts, and whispered secrets. Leo's tablet began to gather dust in a corner. He started smiling again, a real, brilliant smile, that transformed his serious little face and lit up his father's world. Elara found her own purpose. She wasn't just a guest anymore. She started cooking, filling the kitchen with the warm smells of baking bread and simmering soups. She discovered a neglected garden out back and coaxed stubborn, sleeping flowers back to life. She was tending to the house, and in doing so, she was tending to her own bruised soul. She was creating a home. Alistair watched it all unfold. He started coming home earlier. He stopped taking calls during dinner. He would sit on the floor and let the children explain the complex rules of their imaginary games. He would watch Elara as she moved through the kitchen, a small, genuine smile on her face, and feel a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the fireplace. He was falling in love with her. He was falling in love with the family they were accidentally, tentatively becoming. One evening, he came home to find Elara reading a story to both Lily and Leo, who were curled up on either side of her on the sofa, their heads resting on her shoulders. They were all asleep, the book resting open on her lap. The scene was so peaceful, so perfectly right, that it physically hurt his heart. This was what he had been missing. Not just a wife, but a partner. Not just a housekeeper, but a heart for his home. The peace, however, was a fragile bubble, and it was about to burst. The catalyst was an article in a glossy business magazine. It was a profile on Alistair Blackstone, the reclusive genius CEO. There was a paparazzi photo accompanying it, a long lens shot of him leaving a restaurant. He wasn't alone. By his side, laughing at something he'd said, was Elara, and holding his other hand was Lily. They looked, for all the world, like a happy, normal family. The magazine found its way into the wrong hands. Mark saw it. He saw the headline, "Billionaire Blackstone's New Mystery Family." He saw the photo. He saw Elara, looking healthier and more beautiful than he'd ever allowed her to be. He saw his daughter, Lily, holding hands with a man who reeked of money. His first emotion wasn't jealousy. It was rage. How dare she? How dare she be happy? How dare she find someone else, someone better, someone rich? She was his. Her misery was his. His second emotion was greed. Pure, unadulterated greed. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Elara was kneading dough in the kitchen, humming along to a song on the radio. Lily and Leo were in the garden. She was happy, truly, deeply happy. Her phone, a simple, prepaid model Alistair had bought for her, buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello? Well, look at you, landing on your feet." The voice. Ice flooded her veins. The air rushed from her lungs. The half-formed loaf of bread slipped from her flour-dusted hands and hit the floor with a dull thud. It was him, Mark. How did you get this number?" she stammered, her body shaking uncontrollably. "I have my ways," he sneered, and she could picture the cruel twist of his lips. "Saw you in a magazine, Ellie. You and my daughter playing happy families with some rich stiff. Looks like you did okay for yourself. I'm impressed." "What do you want, Mark?" she whispered, her throat closing up. "What's mine, of course," he said, his voice turning hard. "Lily is my daughter, and you, my dear, owe me. Big time. Your new boyfriend looks like he can afford to be generous. $100,000 should be enough to make me go away. A small price to pay to keep your pretty new life intact, don't you think? $100,000. The number was meaningless. It was the threat behind it that mattered. "If you don't pay, he continued, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. I'll go to the press. I'll tell them everything. How you're an unfit mother. How you stole my child. I'll drag your billionaire's name through the mud, and then I'll see you in court for custody, and I'll win. No, not Lily. He couldn't have her. He wouldn't. Leave us alone, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. 100,000. You have 24 hours, he said, and then the line went dead. She collapsed against the counter, gasping for air. The old fear, the one she thought she'd buried, was back. It was a living thing, with claws and teeth, and it was tearing her apart from the inside. He would ruin everything. He would hurt Alistair. He would poison this safe, beautiful world she had found. And worst of all, he would take Lily. She couldn't let that happen. She knew what she had to do. Her past was a disease, and she couldn't bear to infect this family with it. She had to protect them. The only way to do that was to disappear. Again. She ran upstairs, her movements frantic, clumsy. She threw a few of Lily's clothes into a bag, a change of clothes for herself. She grabbed the small tin box where she kept the few dollars she had managed to save. It was all happening again. She was running. Always running. She scribbled a note, her hands shaking so badly the words were nearly illegible. Alistair, I am so sorry. I can't explain. We have to go. Thank you for everything. Please don't look for us. She found Lily in the garden, making a daisy chain with Leo. She had to tear her daughter away from her new best friend, from the only real home she'd ever known. The look of confusion and betrayal in Lily's eyes was a physical blow. Where are we going, Mommy? Lily cried as Elara dragged her towards the gate. We have to go, Sweet Pea, now. But what about Leo? What about Alistair? Elara couldn't answer. A sob tore from her throat. She was at the edge of the long driveway, her hand on the cold iron of the gate, when the black car swept in, stopping just inches from her. Alistair got out. He had come home early. He took in the scene in a single, sharp glance. Elara's tear-streaked face, the bag in her hand, Lily's distress. He knew. He didn't know the details, but he knew the shape of it. She was running. Elara, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. What are you doing? I have to go, she choked out, fumbling with the latch on the gate. I can't stay here. I'll ruin you. Ruin me? He stepped closer, blocking her path. What are you talking about? He found me, she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear. Mark, he called. He wants money. He's threatening to go to the press to take Lily. I can't let him hurt you. Or Leo. We have to go. She tried to push past him, but he caught her arms, his grip firm but not harsh. He held her, forcing her to look at him. No, he said. The word was absolute, a command. You don't understand. No, Elara, you don't understand, he said, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity she had never seen before. This is your home now. This is Lily's home. No one is going anywhere. But he'll destroy you. Let him try, Alistair said, a cold fury hardening his features. He thinks he can threaten me? He thinks he can threaten my family? He has no idea who he's dealing with. He gently let go of her arms and knelt down in front of Lily, who was crying silently. He wiped her tears with his thumb. No one is ever going to take you away, Lily, he said, his voice full of unwavering conviction. I will not let that happen. Do you understand? Lily nodded, her sobs subsiding into hiccups. Alistair stood up and looked back at Elara. The fury was gone from his eyes, replaced by a fierce, unwavering loyalty that took her breath away. "You are not fighting this alone anymore," he said. "His mistake wasn't finding you. His mistake was threatening us." He took the bag from her hand and let it drop to the ground. He took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Then he took Lily's hand. "Come on," he said, leading them back towards the house, back towards the safety she had been so ready to abandon. "Let's go home." As they walked, Leo ran out of the front door, his face pale with worry. He saw them, saw that Lily was back, and a wave of relief washed over him. He ran to Lily and took her other hand. The four of them walked back into the house together. Not as a billionaire and his charity cases, but as a family united against the storm. Alistair Blackstone did not build a global empire by being passive. When threatened, he did not retreat. He acted, decisively, powerfully. He sat Elara down in his study, a room of dark wood and leather-bound books that smelled of authority. He gave her a cup of sweet tea and waited until her shaking subsided. "Tell me everything," he said. And she did. She told him about the years of fear, the constant belittling, the way Mark had isolated her and chipped away at her confidence until she felt like nothing. She told him about the threats, the control, the final desperate escape in the middle of the night with nothing but Lily and a small backpack. Alistair listened without interruption. His face was a stone mask, but a muscle twitched in his jaw, a sign of the cold rage building within him. When she finished, the silence in the room was heavy. "He will never touch you or Lily again," he said. It was not a reassurance. It was a vow. He made 2 calls. The first was to his personal lawyer, a man renowned for being the most ruthless and effective legal mind in the city. The second was to a private security firm. Within an hour, a discreet security team was posted at the gates. The house, already a fortress, became impenetrable. By the next morning, his lawyer had filed for a temporary restraining order and begun proceedings to terminate Mark's parental rights permanently, citing abandonment and emotional abuse. A team of investigators was already digging into every shady corner of Mark's life, and they were finding plenty. Mark, expecting a terrified woman to deliver a bag of cash, instead received a visit from 2 grim-faced men who served him with legal papers that made his head spin. His bluff had been called with overwhelming force. The next few weeks were tense. The media caught wind of the story, just as Mark had threatened. Tabloids ran sensational headlines. "Billionaire's new love has a dark past." "Ugly custody battle for Blackstone's heir apparent?" Elara wanted to hide, to crumble under the weight of the public scrutiny. Every article felt like a fresh wound. But Alistair was a rock. "This is just noise," he told her, tossing a newspaper into the fire. "It means nothing. The only thing that matters is what happens in the courtroom. The only thing that matters is us." He made a public declaration, not a press conference, but a simple, powerful statement released through his company. "Elara and her daughter Lily are part of my family. I will protect them with every resource at my command. Any attempt to harm or harass them will be met with the full force of the law." It was a line drawn in the sand, a public declaration of loyalty that silenced most of the speculation. He was choosing her, openly and without reservation, prioritizing her safety over his pristine public image. The court date arrived on a cold, rainy morning. Elara felt sick with nerves. Alistair held her hand the entire way to the courthouse, his grip a constant grounding pressure. Mark was there, looking small and pathetic without his bluster. He tried to catch her eye, to give her one of his old, intimidating glares, but she wouldn't look at him. She looked at Alistair. The proceedings were brutal, but swift. Alistair's legal team presented a mountain of evidence. Proof of Mark's long history of threats, his financial instability, his criminal record for petty fraud, and a signed testimony from a child psychologist who had spoken with Lily. When Elara was called to the stand, her voice trembled at first, but then she looked at Alistair, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. She took a deep breath, and she spoke her truth. Calmly, clearly, without fear. She was no longer the broken woman from the street corner. She had a voice. She had found her strength. The judge's decision was swift and unequivocal. Mark's parental rights were terminated. A permanent restraining order was granted. He was legally erased from their lives. It was over. Walking out of the courtroom into the cleansing rain, Elara felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It was the feeling of a chain long wrapped around her soul, finally shattering. She was free, truly and completely free. That evening, the house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. A peaceful, contented silence. The storm had passed. Alistair found her in the garden she had brought back to life. The rain had stopped, and the air was fresh and clean. The flowers, vibrant and alive, seemed to glow in the twilight. He stood beside her, not speaking for a long moment. "It's really over," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Yes," he said. "A new beginning." He turned to face her, taking both of her hands in his. His gray eyes were soft, filled with an emotion so deep it made her heart ache. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with feeling. "When I met you, my life was quiet. My house was an empty shell. I was just a father and a CEO. You and Lily. You filled it with life again, with laughter, with love. You taught my son how to smile. You taught me how to live again. You healed us." Tears welled in her eyes. "You saved us, Alistair." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "I don't want this to be a temporary arrangement. I don't want to be your protector anymore. I want to be your partner. I want to be your husband. I want this to be our family. For real. Forever." From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. He didn't kneel. He just stood before her, an equal, offering his heart. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring with a single, perfect diamond that shone like a captured star. Before Elara could even find her voice to answer, two small figures came bursting out of the house. "Say yes," Lily shouted, her face alight with pure joy. "Please say yes, Elara," Leo echoed, grabbing her free hand. "We want you to be our mom." The children. Their approval was the final, most important piece. Elara looked from their eager, hopeful faces to the face of the man she loved, the man who had shown her what true strength and kindness looked like. Her heart was so full, it felt like it might burst. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to speak. "Yes," she finally managed to whisper. "Yes, 1,000 times. Yes." Alistair slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He drew her into his arms, and the children piled in, a tangle of happy limbs and joyful laughter. They stood there, a complete circle, a family forged not by blood, but by chance, by kindness, and by a love strong enough to weather any storm. Their wedding was not a grand affair for the society pages. It took place a few months later, in the garden Elara had so lovingly restored. The only guests were Mrs. Gable and Alistair's lawyer. The officiant was a kind-faced judge who was a friend of the family. Leo was the best man, standing beside his father in a miniature version of Alistair's suit, his face beaming with pride. Lily was the flower girl, scattering petals from a small basket with solemn importance. She wore a simple white dress and a crown of daisies she and Elara had made that morning. Elara wore a simple, elegant ivory dress. She wasn't a princess in a fairy tale. She was a survivor, a mother, a woman who had walked through fire and found paradise on the other side. As she walked down the grassy aisle toward Alistair, she held a small, slightly crumpled piece of paper in her hand. It was the drawing Lily had given Leo on that first day, the picture of two children holding hands under a giant, smiling sun. When they said their vows, they weren't just promises to each other, they were promises to the children. I promise to love you, to honor you, and to protect our family always, Alistair said, his eyes never leaving hers. I promise to fill our home with love and laughter, and to be a partner to you and a mother to our children in all things, Elara replied, her voice steady and sure. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Alistair didn't just kiss his bride. He knelt down, and together he and Elara hugged their children, the four of them clinging to each other in the warm afternoon sun. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, they sat on a blanket on the lawn, eating cake. Lily leaned against Elara, her eyelids growing heavy. "Mommy?" she murmured sleepily. "Yes, sweet pea?" "I'm glad Mr. Blackstone's job was interesting enough for career day." Elara smiled, her heart full. "Me too, baby, me too." Alistair wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. He looked at his family, his son laughing as he tried to get icing on Lily's nose, his daughter safe and content in her mother's arms, and his wife, his beautiful, resilient wife, who had shown him that the broken pieces of a life weren't the end. They were just the beginning. They were the foundation for building something new, something stronger, something whole.